Happy 4th of July, everyone. It is Independence Day here, and America is celebrating with fireworks and barbecue, and it's a great old time. And I got to thinking, in all of the previous 4th of Julys that I have been alive for, I have not once ever taken the time to go back and read and study the Declaration of Independence, which is the whole reason we celebrate this national holiday. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. We're going to read through the Declaration, not all of it, the first 155 words, and we're going to study it. And this is important. The Declaration of Independence is our nation's birth certificate. It's what sets forth the principles and fundamental beliefs about how government works that our government was built off of. And so it's kind of important to know, I feel like, especially if you're an American citizen, you should probably know this document. And given the current state of our nation and my own personal experience with school and what schools teach, that personal experience being I can't recall a single time where I was required to read or know anything about the Declaration of Independence for any history or government class, I think it's fairly safe to assume that probably not a lot of Americans actually know what the Declaration of Independence says. I feel like, if anything, a lot of schools, the only thing they teach about the Declaration of Independence is that it was written. It was what separated America and Great Britain, and of course everyone's favorite, taxation without representation. All right, so we're going to be reading the document, and actually I have... This is the Declaration of Independence, and is what we're going to be reading. This isn't the real one. The real one is much bigger than this. This is a parchment reproduction of the Declaration that I got from the National Archives in D.C. I'm even wearing the shirt. Honestly, I did not plan that. And funnily enough, the National Archives is where the real one is kept. So this is the document that we're going to be reading. And so the structure a little bit, or the layout of the document, you have the title, of course, and then you have the first 155 words, the start of the document, which is what we're going to be studying, which is basically the founders writing to Great Britain saying, hey, this is what we believe, this is what we're all about. You guys and us, we're not working out. And then the bulk of the document, which is all the rest of this, is a listing of 27 grievances that the colonies had against Great Britain, and then at the bottom is signing the thing. And also, just as a quick side note, as far as the grievances, there are a total of 27 grievances listed, and taxation without representation comes in number 17. It didn't even make the top 10. It didn't even make it in the top 50 percentile of reasons why we're separating from Great Britain. So that just goes to show how important it was to the Americans. Obviously, it was important enough to make it on the document, but it's not as important as what schools teach and what they make it out to be. So let's get started. Let's start reading this thing. I have some notes here. So part of why we're studying this is actually because it lays out, it lays the groundwork for American government and what we believe. But there was a guy whose name was Alexis de Tocqueville. He was a French person who came to America and wrote Democracy in America. That's a very misleading title, by the way, because we're not a democracy. I'll touch on that later as well. But in it, he talks about how we are exceptional as a nation, and this is true. America has been the most successful, prosperous, and wealthiest nation in the history of the world, and there's a reason for that. Those reasons are part of the groundwork laid in the Declaration of Independence that we're going to study. And so this idea of American exceptionalism has 6 core principles that are found within the first 155 words of the Declaration of Independence, which is why we are looking at and studying and reading those first 155 words. So, I'm going to read those real quick, and then we're going to dive into them, into the various different points separately. So, let us read. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth that separate the equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Now, pause real quick before we keep going. Basically, that big ol' sentence, what that says is, hey, Great Britain, you and us, we're not working out here. We're going to separate from you, and we're going to tell you why, because that's the respectful thing to do. All right, so let's move on. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. So that is the first 155 words of the Declaration of Independence. I just read it. I have some notes here. We're going to go through one by one the various different points of American exceptionalism that are found in this. Now, these points are a little bit out of order as far as you reading them on the document goes, but the order of the points listed actually makes more sense, kind of, as far as what is being established. So, point number 1, all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator. This phrase admits that there is a God, right? This is government admitting that there is a higher power under which it is subject, and this is the first key to having a limited government. And the founders stressed the importance of this heavily. There's a quote by George Washington that reads, "It is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and to humbly implore His protection and favor." Similarly, John Adams quoted, "The safety and prosperity of nations ultimately and essentially depend on the protection and the blessing of Almighty God, and the national acknowledgement of this truth is an indispensable duty which the people owe to Him." So, point number 1, there is a God. Moving on to point number 2, the phrase we're going to be looking at is, they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. After acknowledging that there is a God, you must recognize that there are rights that are only given by God. The government is not the source of all things as much as it likes to think that it is. So, what is an unalienable right? A quote by John Adams reads that inalienable rights are antecedent to all earthly government and cannot be repealed or restrained by human laws, and these are rights derived from the great legislator of the universe. John Dickinson described them as rights which God gave to you and to which no inferior power has the right to take away. Alexander Hamilton noted that inalienable rights are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written, as with a sunbeam in the whole volume of human nature, by the aid of the divinity itself, and can never be erased or obscured by mortal power. Either our rights come from God or they come from man. If they come from God, then, as the founders expressed, we are required to recognize and protect them. But if they come from man, then that means that man has the power to regulate, alter, or abolish them, and the government's power over our lives essentially becomes unlimited. And this is an important note because it is impossible for a secular government to be limited. because a secular government recognizes no authority other than itself and no rights other than that what it has bestowed. So that is point number 2. Inalienable rights come from God. The third passage that we are going to be looking at reads that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Once you recognize that there is a God, and you recognize that certain rights come from God, it becomes the duty of governments to ensure to every individual the opportunity to exercise his or her God-given rights, and that means all of them. Not some of them, but all of them. Thomas Jefferson agreed with this. Government is to declare and enforce only our natural rights and duties, and to take none of them from us. The next phrase in the Declaration of Independence we are looking at reads, to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. And specifically, the phrase here that we're going to be looking at is the law of nature and nature's God. That phrase actually comes from what was during the founding era the most popular law book, and that was William Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. And in it, he explains what the phrase means, and the phrase basically recognizes that God has a given fixed moral law. And these moral laws are visible not only in what God has created through nature, which is where the laws of nature part comes from, but also that God has given a second revelation to his moral law to us through his written word in the Bible, which is where the nature's God part comes into play. And these two revelations always agree with each other, and they never disagree. Just as an example, I will give 2 examples, right? Number 1, abortion. God's word makes it very clear that abortion is wrong. Nature also makes it very clear that abortion is wrong, because there is no species in the entire planet that murders its young in the womb. All right, so number 2, just a second example, homosexuality. The Bible makes it very clear that homosexuality is wrong, and so does nature. Now, albeit, while there are occasions of homosexual practices out in nature, they're always aberrations and never the norm. So there are lots more examples. Those are just 2 examples of which the laws of nature and nature's God, they always agree and they never disagree. So this 4th point of American exceptionalism is that there is a fixed moral law. Point number 5 comes from the phrase, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, consent of the governed is historically known as social compact theory, from which we get social compact laws. These laws fall below the level of the moral law. God's moral law declares what is absolutely right and wrong. Social compact laws it's basically society's agreement upon what is relatively right and wrong and necessary to create a civilized society. These are things like laws regulating speed limits, parking regulations, those kinds of things. These are social compact laws. And the way you measure a social compact law, it can be found in a quote that George Washington gave. He says that the fundamental principle of our Constitution enjoins that the will of the majority shall prevail. Now, with that, though, comes a very important point. I believe I mentioned earlier in the video how I would speak on the difference between democracy or republic, or no, what I mentioned was how Alexis de Tocqueville's title of the piece that he wrote was Democracy in America, and I said that that is misleading, and a lot of people today seem to think that America is a democracy We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. And the difference is basically this fifth point found in the Declaration of Independence. In a republic, there is a fixed moral law that the will of the majority and consent of the governed, it's completely irrelevant when it comes to moral law and inalienable rights. We have no jurisdiction over these areas. We cannot make any laws controlling or regulating them. In a democracy, however, if 100% of the population decides that rape and arson are no longer illegal, then congratulations, rape and arson are no longer illegal. That's not the case here in America. We're not a democracy, we are a republic. And if you want further proof of that, give Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution a read. It basically says that all states in this nation are to maintain a republican form of government, and also recite the Pledge of Allegiance. It's always to the republic for which it stands, not to the democracy for which it stands. So moving on, point number 6, and this is the final point, and we get this point from the following: that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. So what we see here is that good government is supposed to safeguard the previous 5 tenets we've looked at. I am all out of frame. The previous 5 tenets we looked at. And so, if government fails to do so, then the people have the right to modify it or completely replace it. There is a catch, though, with this, and that is, if we were to ever do this, we should not ever get to a place where we are without government, as that would be anarchy, which the Bible condemns, and civil government is an institution established by God under which we are to live. So we have to have a government, so if we ever replace it, then it would probably be a little bit tricky, but we can't have anarchy. There's a quote by Samuel Adams that reads, "The people alone have an incontestable, unalienable, and indefeasible right to institute government and to reform, alter, or totally change the same when their protection, safety, prosperity, and happiness require it. And the federal Constitution, according to the mode prescribed therein, has already undergone such amendments in several parts of it as from experience has been judged necessary." This is what Article 5 of the Constitution allows for. Article 5 is the amendment article. It's the amendment process that gives us the ability to amend or change the Constitution. All right, so we have looked at 6 tenets of American exceptionalism that can be found in the first 155 words of the Declaration of Independence. And it is because of these principles that America has been so great a nation. President Calvin Coolidge once said that to live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race. And how right he was. America, again, has been the wealthiest, greatest, most prosperous nation in the history of the world, and there is a reason for that. And if we want to preserve our freedom, then there are some things that we, the people, must do. Number 1, we, the people, need God. Our nation was founded on the Bible, as is very evident by looking at these 6 points found in the Declaration of Independence. Number 2, we, the people, need to get involved. Remember that government's power comes from the consent of the governed. That's us. There is a quote by President James Garfield that sums this point up perfectly, and it reads, "Now, more than ever before, the people are responsible for the character of their Congress. If that body be ignorant, reckless, and corrupt, it is because the people tolerate ignorance, recklessness, and corruption. If it be intelligent, brave, and pure, It is because the people demand these high qualities to represent them in the national legislature. If the next centennial does not find us a great nation, it will be because those who represent the enterprise, the culture, and the morality of the nation do not aid in controlling the political forces. So this is point number 2. We need to get involved. There are some Christians and some people who think that Christians should not be involved in the political arena. That's just false. We see multiple instances in the Bible where people have gotten involved in the political arena. Christians have gotten involved in the political arena. People who have been told by God himself to get involved. And government itself is instituted by God, so we Christians need to be a part of that and help steward the nation that God has given us. We need to get involved, and we need to actually read and study our nation's founding documents. This was just the Declaration of Independence. There's also the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all the other amendments, and everything else in history. We need to return to God, and we need to get involved and know our history and our nation's founding. And again, a great resource for this and where I got all my information from is Wall Builders. So that is the Declaration of Independence, or at least the first 155 words of it. Those are the 6 pillars or tenets of American exceptionalism, and if we return to reading and understanding these, and if we return to God and we start getting involved, then we can preserve these freedoms that are being attacked regularly today. So, hopefully you guys found this video interesting. Hopefully you learned something and you go away having learned something more than when you came in. If you like the video, please consider subscribing and liking. Leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you in another video. Take care.